The first rays of light filtered through the translucent canopy of Lishar's towering crystal trees. Anera sat in silence on the smooth stone floor of her mother's chamber. Elder Eleni lay weakly on a raised bed, her luminous skin dimmed to an ashen hue. The gentle hum of healing stones surrounding the elder provided little comfort to Anera's racing thoughts. "My child," Elder Eleni whispered, her voice a soft breeze, "you must not grieve. The universe has its cycle. But I cannot let you fade away." Anera replied, clasping her mother's hand. Her purple eyes, shimmering with unfallen tears, mirrored her resolve. "There is still one way to save you. The elixir of immortality exists. Hidden, yes, but not beyond reach." Her mother's lips curved into a faint smile. "The galactic vault is impenetrable. Many have tried and failed. To attempt it, I will not fail." Anera's tone was firm, even as doubt tugged at the corners of her mind. The elixir of immortality, a relic from a time when the galaxy was young, was a substance capable of halting time's cruel march. Legends spoke of it being safeguarded within the galactic vault, an unassailable fortress of ancient design. To obtain it would require courage, wisdom, and perhaps most crucially, help from beyond Lishar. The bustling spaceport on Earth's orbital platform was a far cry from the tranquil elegance of Lishar. Crowded corridors buzzed with merchants, travelers, and curious automatons. Anera moved through the throng with deliberate steps, her iridescent cloak brushing lightly against her ankles. Her destination was a repair bay nestled in one of the quieter sectors of the station. There, she had arranged to meet Captain Elias Kane, a human whose ingenuity had earned him a reputation even in distant star systems. Inside the workshop, the air smelled of metal and ozone. Sparks flew as a tall figure worked beneath the exposed engine of a battered spacecraft. "Captain Kane," Anera called, her voice cutting through the clatter. The man straightened and turned to face her. His dark eyes held a mix of surprise and curiosity as they took in the alien before him. "I wasn't expecting a Lisharan visitor," he said, wiping his hands on a grease-stained rag. "What can I do for you?" Anera's eyes gleamed with determination. "I need your help to access the galactic vault." For a moment, Kane simply stared at her, then threw back his head and laughed. "The galactic vault? You're joking." "I assure you, I am not," Anera replied, her tone steady. She reached into a small pouch at her waist and produced a glowing crystal the size of a thumbnail. The artifact pulsed faintly, its light casting dancing patterns on the walls. Kane's laughter died as he studied the crystal. "That's authentic. Is this payment for a suicide mission?" "No, it's an investment in success," Anera said. "I know of your skills, Captain. Humanity's reputation for creativity precedes it. With your knowledge and my guidance, I believe we can succeed." Kane leaned against the engine, crossing his arms. "The vault isn't just some puzzle to solve. It's guarded by tech no one fully understands. Those who try to break in don't come back. And yet the vault was built by hands, and no creation is without a flaw," Anera countered. "I have studied its origins, the ancient glyphs on Lishar point to a hidden pathway, one only a Lisharan can decipher. But I lack the technological knowledge to act upon this alone. That's why I came to you." Kane studied her face, noting the quiet desperation beneath her composed exterior. "Why risk your life for this?" "My mother is dying," Anera said simply. "The elixir of immortality is her only chance. I cannot fail her, Captain. Will you help me?" The sincerity in her voice struck a chord. Though skeptical, Kane found himself admiring her resolve. The prospect of breaking into the galactic vault was as impossible as it was thrilling. And the Lisharan crystal. He could only imagine the treasure trove it came from. After a long silence, he finally said, "I don't take on jobs lightly, especially ones with a high chance of getting me killed." Anera's shoulders slumped slightly, but before she could turn to leave, he added, "But I'm not one to back down from a challenge either. Let's see if the rumors about human ingenuity hold true. Relief and gratitude lit up her face. Thank you, Captain Kane. Together, we will succeed. As Anara and Kane began sketching out a plan, the enormity of the task became clear. They would need a ship capable of navigating treacherous space, tools to disable sophisticated security, and a strategy to evade detection. Despite the odds, a spark of hope burned bright in Anara's heart. Unknown to them, forces within the Galactic Council were already monitoring the vault. Any attempt to breach it could set off a chain of events that neither Anara nor Kane could predict. Still, for Anara, failure was not an option. The journey to save her mother, and perhaps test the limits of humanity's resilience, had begun. The spaceport hummed with the busy rhythm of travelers, mechanical drones, and ships coming and going. Anara stood beside Captain Elias Kane as they finalized their plan. The lines between them had already blurred. Anara had learned that Kane was more than just a stubborn engineer. Beneath the tough exterior was a mind that saw the impossible as just another puzzle to solve. "All right, Lisharan," Kane said, crossing his arms with a determined look. "We need to get a ship capable of surviving the trek to the Galactic Vault. And don't think your glowing crystal can just teleport us there." Anara couldn't help but smile at the humor in his tone, despite the danger that lay ahead. "I had no such expectation, Captain. But I believe our combined skills will get us closer to our goal." Kane scanned the shipyard. His gaze drifted to a sleek, mid-sized craft parked in the far corner, a forgotten relic of humanity's early space expansion. "We'll use the Starlight Falcon. It's got the speed, a reinforced hull, and enough systems to avoid detection if we handle it right." Anara raised an eyebrow. "It looks ancient." Kane grinned. "Human engineering. Tougher than it looks." The next hours passed in a blur of preparation. Anara and Kane navigated the cluttered workshops, collecting everything from tools to rare metals, all while formulating a strategy for their daring mission. Anara had no doubt that every step taken would bring them closer to the vault and the Elixir of Immortality. As dusk fell over the station, the Starlight Falcon hummed to life. Anara took a seat at the co-pilot's side, still in awe of the ship. Despite its age, it exuded a sense of resilience, just like the humans who had made it. Kane moved to the cockpit, quickly checking the systems. "You ready?" he asked, the calm in his voice surprising her. "Yes," Anara replied, her heart racing with anticipation. But deep down, she felt a quiet sense of trust. She had only known Kane for a short time, yet his steadiness helped ground her in these dangerous moments. With a low rumble, the Falcon lifted off, gliding through the layers of Earth's atmosphere before breaking into the serenity of space. Anara gazed out at the infinite stars stretching before them. "How far is it?" Kane asked as he navigated the controls. "Across a vast sector of uncharted space," Anara replied. "I have mapped the rough location. We will need to avoid several defense systems, and some interference from the Galactic Council ships could pose a risk." "Great, so we'll be sneaking in," Kane muttered under his breath. "This is starting to feel more like a covert mission than a treasure hunt." Anara smiled. "It is much more than that. The fate of my people rests on this journey." The flight between Earth and the Galactic Vault took several days. During the long hours in the ship, the two continued to discuss their strategy. Kane shared stories about his time as a soldier and engineer. He talked about the people he had met, the worlds he had visited, and the battles he had fought. Anara listened closely, fascinated by the resilience humanity had shown through generations. Humans were fighters, yes, but not in the way many alien races considered war. Instead, it was their adaptability, their imagination, and their refusal to give up that truly set them apart. She found herself sharing more about her planet and its ancient culture. Lishar was a world where knowledge and wisdom were treasured, and all life flowed in harmony with nature. Yet, even in this peaceful existence, there were dangers, ones that her mother had spent a lifetime keeping at bay. Anera's mother had protected their people with wisdom, forging alliances with other worlds. Now, all Anera wished for was to save the life of the person who had given everything for her people. At times, she caught glimpses of uncertainty in Kane's eyes. As strong as he was, she knew the stakes were high, and the possibility of failure haunted them both. One evening, as they were preparing for another jump through a sector of space notorious for its radiation storms, Anera sensed a rare moment of quiet contemplation from Kane. "What makes you think we'll succeed?" she asked him, her tone soft, though the question had been building for days. Kane looked up from the navigation console. His eyes met hers, steady and intense. "Because we've come this far," he said simply, "and we're not the kind to quit halfway, are we?" Anera smiled. "No, we are not." They moved past the questions of doubt, focusing on the mission at hand. As they approached the boundary of a dense nebula, one that masked the vault's coordinates, Kane switched on the ship's cloaking device. The ship shuddered slightly as the sensors adjusted. "We'll need to stay quiet as long as possible," Kane said, his voice now sharp with focus. "A shift in the signal pattern might be the only way we get through undetected. Let's hope it doesn't come down to it." "I have a feeling we'll make it," Anera said, and though the words were simple, they carried the weight of her hope for the future. As the Starlight Falcon glided through the nebula's misty clouds, the stars seemed to vanish, swallowed up by the vastness of space. Anera took one last look at the ship's quiet interior. In this moment, a sense of unity surged between them, and for the first time, she felt truly ready for the challenges to come. Together, they would break through the obstacles ahead. Together, they would retrieve the Elixir of Immortality, and nothing would stand in their way. The nebula thickened around them, its swirling colors casting strange shadows across the ship's hull. The Starlight Falcon glided silently, a ghost in the vastness of space, concealed under layers of advanced cloaking technology. Anera, sitting beside Kane, focused intently on the holographic map, her fingers tracing along the route toward the galactic vault's coordinates. "We're almost there," she said softly, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. The vault was only a few light years ahead, hidden within a barren asteroid field that was virtually impossible to navigate without the right technology or the right pilot. Luckily, Kane had both. Kane's fingers worked swiftly over the controls, every movement precise and purposeful. He glanced up from his dashboard, his face lit by the glow of various holographic screens. "How do we get in once we get there?" "The vault's defenses are no joke. A single misstep, and we'll be floating debris." Anera held his gaze, her eyes filled with determination. "There is a hidden entrance, a path that only the Lisharen can unlock. The key is in the ancient scripts I found on my planet. They'll lead us straight to the door, but the rest—" She paused, thinking for a moment. "It's up to us." Kane nodded. The challenge was set, and he could feel the weight of their journey pressing down on him. Even with all his experience as a former soldier, there was something deeply unsettling about trying to breach one of the galaxy's most fortified and ancient structures. Still, he wasn't backing down now. He hadn't come this far to turn back. As the Falcon inched closer to the asteroid field, a strange sensation began to tingle on the back of Anera's neck. It was subtle, a shift in the atmosphere, or perhaps a change in the electromagnetic pulse around them. Something felt wrong, and it was almost as if they were being watched. She took a deep breath, pushing the feeling aside. Her mission had only one goal: to reach the vault, retrieve the elixir, and save her mother. Anything else was a distraction. Kane steered the ship through the asteroid field with expert precision. Every movement was calculated, avoiding the dense web of floating rocks that could easily tear the Falcon apart. Anera stayed close to the map, guiding him with her knowledge of the hidden path, a series of tunnels that had been lost to the records of time. Only those who held the knowledge could navigate through the dangerous maze. "Hold on," Kane said suddenly, his voice tight. A massive asteroid loomed ahead, seemingly blocking their path. Anera gasped, but Cain remained calm. He quickly altered their trajectory, sending them on a spiraling course around the obstacle. The falcon shuddered with each close call, the shaking rattling their bones, but Cain's grip on the controls never faltered. "You didn't tell me we'd be dodging asteroids," Anera said, her heart still racing. "I didn't tell you a lot of things," Cain replied with a grin, although it didn't hide the tension in his voice. "Stay focused. We're almost at the vault entrance." The falcon emerged from the dense field, finally coming to a dead stop before the vault's massive, unyielding gate. Anera could feel the weight of its presence. This ancient structure had been untouched for millennia. It was no ordinary vault. It was a testament to the ingenuity of those who had built it, meant to protect the greatest of treasures. Only those who truly understood its secrets would gain access. Cain's hands froze over the controls. "That's it. That's the vault." Anera looked at the structure before them, her eyes wide with awe and fear. The gate before them was towering, its surface covered with thousands of ancient glyphs, each one a key to the mystery behind the vault's defenses. "It is," she replied. "But it's not just the door that we need to worry about. We'll have to navigate the puzzles and traps inside before we can even think about finding the elixir." "So much for just walking up and grabbing a bottle," Cain muttered, running a hand through his hair. He exhaled sharply, then looked at Anera, his eyes serious. "Are you ready for this?" Anera didn't hesitate. "I was born ready." They both got out of their seats. With determination, they'd made their way toward the airlock, where the shimmering gates of the vault awaited them. Anera retrieved the Lisharan artifact from her pocket, holding it in her palm. The crystal pulsed faintly, as if it were alive. The moment Anera stepped forward, a low hum vibrated through the ship, as if the vault was reacting to her presence. The door began to shift, revealing a small circular aperture. It was not much, but it was enough for them to slip inside. Before they entered, Anera glanced back at Cain. "Once we go in, there's no turning back. Are you sure you're prepared for what comes next?" Cain nodded. "If this thing can be cracked, we'll crack it. Together. Together." Anera's heart skipped at the word, and for the briefest moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of hope. It wasn't just a battle to retrieve the elixir. It was about saving what mattered most, and with Cain by her side, she knew they had a fighting chance. As the airlock sealed shut behind them, the vault's entrance hissed open, and they stepped into a dark, chamber-like space. The air felt dense, almost thick with anticipation. The hum of ancient machinery echoed faintly, and the walls seemed to pulse with quiet power. Somewhere ahead, the elixir lay waiting. They just had to find it. The vault would test them both, push their abilities to their limits, but nothing would stop them now. Together, they would defeat the odds. The air inside the vault was thick with the weight of centuries. Anera's eyes slowly adjusted to the low light, the dimly glowing walls casting strange shadows across the room. They stood at the entrance to a wide corridor, one that stretched far into the heart of the vault. The only sounds were the faint hum of ancient machinery and their quiet footsteps on the cold floor. "What now?" Cain whispered, his voice sharp with concentration. His fingers were hovering over his blaster, but there was no immediate threat in sight. Anera's hand tightened around the Lisharan artifact in her pocket. "We follow the path," she said quietly. "The vault won't give up its secrets easily. We'll face several trials designed to test us. And how do we get past them?" Cain asked, glancing around. "Is there a key to all this?" Anera nodded. "Yes, my people left markers here, clues to guide those worthy of entering the final chamber. But we must be patient. The vault won't let us pass without a challenge." As if on cue, the room before them trembled lightly, and the floor shifted, revealing a set of doors sliding open with a deep mechanical groan. A bright light poured into the corridor, and they found themselves facing an obstacle, an enormous stone door covered in complex, twisting symbols. The lock was unlike anything Anara had ever seen before, glowing faintly with an energy that seemed ancient, yet powerful. Kane stood still for a moment, considering the door carefully. "A riddle, huh?" he muttered, examining the symbols. "This is where the fun begins, right?" Anara took a step forward, studying the symbols closely. "It's not just a riddle. These are keys to the locks of the mind. It tests whether we understand the nature of the vault itself. Each symbol represents a piece of knowledge, a truth about the galaxy." "So, do we have to answer questions?" Kane asked, raising an eyebrow. "Is there a quiz we have to pass?" "I wish it were that simple." Anara smiled faintly, then turned to the door, her hands glowing with energy. "We'll need to channel my ancestors' energy into the symbols. I must connect the old wisdom with my heart, for only then will the door open." Kane watched as Anara closed her eyes and stood before the ancient stone door. Her focus seemed intense, her face serene as she gathered her energy. The symbols glowed brighter, their ancient power responding to Anara's presence. For a moment, it felt as though the very air around them hummed with life, a magic that connected past and present, life and death. A sound, soft at first, grew louder, like an unseen force pushing the air around them. With a soft crack, the door slowly creaked open. But it wasn't a simple mechanism. No, this was an invitation to step deeper into the vault's mysteries, a door that would not yield easily. Inside the room stood a massive stone statue, a guardian, towering at least 3 times their height. It looked ancient, made of some material Anara didn't recognize, with glowing eyes that seemed to follow their every movement. The ground before the statue was lined with strange, glowing runes. "This doesn't look good," Kane muttered, his eyes narrowed. "A guardian? It's like it's waiting for us." Anara nodded, stepping cautiously into the room. "It is," she agreed, her voice steady but low. "This is one of the vault's first trials." The moment she crossed the threshold, the guardian's eyes flickered to life, casting an eerie green glow that seemed to reflect off the walls. Its voice boomed in a language they both did not understand, and for a split second, the entire room shook. The rooms on the ground pulsed with energy. Kane reached for his blaster instinctively, but Anara stopped him with a quick gesture. "No weapons. This trial is one of understanding, not violence." The guardian lowered its massive head, and its voice reverberated in their minds. "Prove your worth. Solve the riddle of the eternal mind, and the path will open." Anara stepped forward, feeling the weight of its challenge settle on her shoulders. "What is the riddle?" she asked aloud, though she already knew it was not a question that could be answered with simple words. It was a test of deeper knowledge, something beyond what the guardian would speak directly. The statue's eyes glowed brighter, and once again, its voice echoed through their minds. "I am not seen, but felt. I carry the weight of stars and the winds of time. I am the silence between all sounds, the pause before every thought. What am I?" Anara felt her heart race. The riddle was complex, woven with layers of meaning. She searched her memory, reaching deep within for the answer that would satisfy the vault's guardian. She had heard similar riddles in her training, riddles from ancient texts her mother had shown her. For a moment, she stood there, unable to speak, lost in her thoughts. And then, it hit her. The answer wasn't just something logical. It had to resonate with the very nature of the vault, and with the understanding her ancestors had passed on to her. "I know the answer," Anara said confidently, stepping forward to face the guardian directly. "It is the breath, the invisible force that connects all life." The statue's eyes dimmed, and there was a loud click as the runes on the ground receded, revealing a new path that stretched forward into the darkness. Anara smiled to herself. The vault was full of hidden secrets and dangers, but every step brought her closer to the Elixir of Immortality, and with Kane by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. "Let's go," Kane said, his tone one of respect. This isn't over yet. Together, they moved into the next chamber, unsure of what awaited them, but ready to face whatever challenges the vault would throw their way. Their journey was far from over, but with each trial, they were closer to their goal. Nara and Cain stepped cautiously into the next chamber. This room was unlike the others they had encountered in the vault. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the walls seemed to close in on them with every step they took. A deep, unnatural stillness filled the space, making Anara's heart race. She could feel it. The next trial was about to begin. The path before them was long and winding, with no visible exit. The only light came from strange, floating orbs high above them, casting an eerie glow across the room. Each orb flickered like a tiny flame, but the light it gave off only seemed to darken the space around them. The entire chamber felt like it was filled with shadows, shifting and moving in the corner of their eyes. "This feels wrong," Cain whispered, his voice betraying his unease. "We're walking right into a trap, aren't we?" Anara didn't answer at first. She had learned long ago to trust her instincts. Every step felt like they were walking deeper into a place where time and reality no longer mattered. She tightened her grip on the Lisharan artifact in her pocket, knowing it was the key to unlocking the trials that awaited them. "I don't know," Anara replied quietly. "But I do know that every trial has a purpose. If we're going to make it through, we have to trust that this path will lead us closer to the elixir." As they walked deeper into the chamber, the shadows began to shift. Shapes formed and dissolved in the darkness around them. At first, they were just dark outlines, but soon, those shapes took form, figures moving in the darkness. Cain instinctively reached for his blaster again, but Anara stopped him. "Don't. We don't know who, or what, they are." "Right," Cain said, lowering his hand slowly. "But if these things attack, we won't have a choice but to defend ourselves." Anara nodded in agreement. She had heard the tales of the vault's trial of shadows, a test of the mind, not of force. Those who failed to understand the nature of their inner darkness never made it out of the vault alive. The shadows weren't physical threats. They were reflections of their fears, their regrets, their pasts. The shadows slowly took more distinct shapes, human forms, alien shapes, things that shouldn't have been possible. Anara's heart skipped when she saw one shadow that looked remarkably like her mother. The silhouette was unmistakable, though her mother's figure was distorted, monstrous in its form. "Mother," Anara whispered, her breath catching in her throat. Cain noticed her reaction. "Anara, are you okay?" Anara fought to regain her composure, shaking her head. It's not her." Her voice was steady now, though her pulse was quickening. The shadow of her mother didn't speak, only watched with vacant, hollow eyes. Anara forced herself to look away, but the feeling of dread lingered, crawling up her spine. Then, another shadow emerged in front of her. Cain, his face twisted in an expression she didn't recognize. It was as though it wasn't him at all. The Cain in front of her was angry, fearful, accusing her for something she had no memory of. He pointed an accusing finger. "You never told me the truth, Anara. You just used me. You've been hiding your true intentions all along." Anara stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. That wasn't Cain. This wasn't what he was like. But the shadow spoke with his voice, and the expression on its face mirrored every doubt she had buried deep inside her. "No," she said, shaking her head firmly. "I'm here because I want to save my mother. All I've done has been for her." But the shadow didn't speak any longer. It began to advance toward her, its form becoming more solid with every step. Anara fought the urge to back away. The shadows were playing with her mind, showing her her worst fears, misunderstandings, hidden insecurities, the guilt of putting Cain in this dangerous situation. She had to fight back. She couldn't let the shadow take control of her emotions. The dark figure of her mother and Cain faded into mist, vanishing from the chamber. Anara blinked, breathing heavily, trying to calm her racing heartbeat. But there was no time to lose. The trial wasn't over yet. More shadows loomed ahead. Kane was looking around warily. That wasn't real, was it? Anera shook her head. No. They were illusions meant to trick us. We have to stay focused. This is the trial of the mind. The shadows cannot touch you unless you let them. Easy for you to say, Kane muttered. The way those things looked, I almost thought I was losing my mind. Anera didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked ahead, where more shadows moved. There were more figures now, each one more elaborate and vivid than the last. Her ancestors had warned her that this trial would test more than just her strength. The vault's trial was testing her ability to face her inner fears and still find the path forward. Ahead, a single shadow stood, tall and solid, casting an intimidating presence. It was a perfect replica of her father, someone she never knew. Anera had heard stories of her father, stories full of anger and betrayal that had torn apart her family when she was young. The shadow of him stood before her, silent. She stepped forward, her heart heavy. But this time, there was no fear. There was only understanding. This isn't real, she whispered. You cannot hold me back anymore. The shadow flickered and vanished like the rest, leaving only silence behind. The darkness lifted, and the path ahead cleared. The trials were far from over, but this chamber was behind them. Kane turned to her, eyes wide with wonder. You did it. You beat them. Anera smiled, feeling the deep sense of relief wash over her. She had passed the trial, not by force, but by embracing her fears and letting them go. We did it together, she said. And now, we can move on. With one last look around, they stepped forward into the next chamber, the vault's deep mysteries still waiting for them. The air in the next chamber was different. It felt warmer, yet the weight of the room seemed more oppressive. The floor beneath Anera's feet was smooth and slightly curved, as though designed to guide them towards a central point. With each step forward, the sound of their footsteps echoed off the walls, creating a rhythmic pattern, like the ticking of a clock counting down their time. We're close, Anera said, her voice tinged with anticipation. Her heart was beating faster, the elixir drawing nearer. Each chamber had led her closer to her ultimate goal. There was no turning back now. Looks like we're heading to the center of it all, Kane observed. He glanced around, his hand still resting on his blaster, though his posture had shifted. The trials had tested them both, but they had emerged stronger for it. They were nearly at the heart of the vault, and he knew whatever lay ahead would not be easy. As they advanced, the walls grew more ornate. Now etched with strange symbols, they seemed to glow faintly, as if pulsing with a life of their own. The farther they traveled, the more the symbols changed, evolving as they neared their destination. At first, Anera couldn't quite decipher their meaning, but soon, something clicked. These markings were telling a story, one of the vault's creation, of its purpose in protecting the greatest secret in the galaxy. Anera stopped, looking at the walls with a mixture of awe and understanding. This was made to preserve something too precious to fall into the wrong hands. Yeah, Kane said, studying the designs, his expression serious. Seems like we've made it to the final act. The end of the hallway opened into a vast chamber, far bigger than any they had seen before. The vault had been hiding a breathtaking sight. In the center of the room was a giant pedestal, and upon it rested a small, simple-looking stone bowl. It was surrounded by delicate, glowing vines that twirled like an intricate spider's web. Everything else in the room was dim, the shadows looming over them, as though trying to prevent them from approaching. It's here, Anera whispered, stepping forward, drawn to the pedestal. But the room itself seemed to react, first subtly, and then with more force. The air became thick, and the temperature dropped sharply, as though the vault had been disturbed by their presence. Kane took a protective stance, eyeing the room carefully. Something's not right. A voice, soft at first, filled the air, as if spoken by the room itself. Only one may receive the elixir. Prove your worth, or be forever cast away. The voice echoed in their minds, and before Anera could respond, a bright light flared to life around the pedestal. From the center of the light, an ethereal figure appeared. It was the guardian of the vault, but this time, it was not the stone statue they had faced earlier. This form was real, an entity of light and energy, her presence both terrifying and comforting. She seemed to embody the vault itself, holding the knowledge of countless suns. Anera stepped forward, her resolve as strong as ever. I've come for the elixir. My mother's life is in danger, and I need its power to save her. The figure before her regarded her with silent intensity. The light shifted, the energy of the room vibrating with an unsettling pulse. The elixir is not simply a cure, it is a bond. To claim it, you must give of yourself, your soul's essence. What do you mean? Anera asked, a knot forming in her stomach. She glanced at Cain, but his expression mirrored hers, uncertainty mixed with confusion. The figure responded slowly, its voice tinged with sorrow. You seek to save your mother, but will the cost be worth it? The elixir grants immortality, yes, but at a price. Those who drink from it are bound to the vault's will forever, their lives intertwined with the knowledge it holds. Your mother's life may be saved, but you would become its guardian. An eternal sacrifice. Anera's heart sank. This was not what she had imagined. The elixir was not the simple solution she had hoped for. Her mind raced as she tried to think of a way out of this. Her mother's life hung in the balance, yet the cost was too great to comprehend. She had always thought of immortality as a gift, but now, faced with this truth, it seemed more like a curse. I can't. Anera began, shaking her head. I can't be bound to the vault forever. I won't sacrifice my life for an eternity in this place. The guardian's figure shifted again, its form becoming more solid, revealing the sorrow it carried. The path forward lies within you, Anera. You are strong, but you must decide whether your mother's life is worth the price. Anera hesitated. She felt the weight of her decision pressing against her chest. Every part of her screamed to reach for the elixir, to take it and save her mother. But what would she be giving up? Could she live knowing her fate would be sealed forever? Cain took a step closer to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. We'll find another way, he said softly. We can't let this vault dictate your fate, Anera. If saving your mother means losing you, then we'll keep searching. We'll do it together. For the first time in this entire journey, Anera allowed herself to breathe. The elixir might promise her mother's survival, but Cain's words reminded her that true strength came not from shortcuts, but from the bonds she shared with others. Looking up at the guardian's glowing form, Anera finally made her decision. I will not claim immortality, she declared. I choose my mother's life, but I choose it through love, not through power. I'll find another way. The light around them flickered, and the figure began to fade, its voice softening. Then you have proved yourself worthy. The elixir remains yours to seek. Your path is your own. And as the guardian disappeared, the vines surrounding the pedestal parted, revealing the elixir, waiting for someone brave enough to claim it, not through sacrifice, but through a heart full of courage and determination. The room grew silent, the glowing vines slowly retracting as if accepting Anera's choice. The weight of her decision still hung heavy in the air. It wasn't easy, yet somehow she felt a sense of relief wash over her, as if she had made the only choice she could. The vault seemed to recognize her bravery, releasing its grip on the elixir and leaving the decision entirely in her hands. Anera glanced over at Cain, who stood just behind her, his presence a comforting reminder that she wasn't alone in this quest. His steady gaze met hers, a silent understanding passing between them. Despite the dangers, despite the mysteries they had uncovered, they had come this far together, and they would continue forward together. They could always find another way. Cain took a deep breath and nodded. You've made the right choice, Anera. No matter the outcome, you'll have no regrets. Anera's chest felt lighter with his reassurance. "Thank you," she whispered. Without another word, they turned their attention to the elixir. The stone bowl remained where it was, surrounded by an ethereal light that now seemed calm, even welcoming. The vines had all but vanished, leaving the pedestal glowing faintly in the center of the room. Anera approached slowly, her eyes never leaving the shimmering liquid in the bowl. It looked so simple, so small in comparison to the vastness of the vault, yet its power was undeniable. This elixir was the key to saving her mother, and perhaps her greatest test yet. Cain stood at her side as she knelt before the pedestal, her hand hovering over the elixir. There was a calmness in her touch, a quiet resolve that had settled in her heart. This moment was significant not because of the power the elixir offered, but because of what Anera had chosen. The strength to forge a new path, one born not of immortality, but of hope, love, and the desire to protect those she cared about. "I will do this for her," Anera said softly, her voice unwavering. Cain smiled gently. "You'll find the way, Anera. You've always had it in you." Taking a deep breath, Anera carefully grasped the bowl, the cool touch of the stone grounding her in the moment. As soon as she lifted it, a gentle hum filled the chamber, the elixir within glowing brighter as though it responded to her resolve. She looked at the liquid again, its glow soft but filled with deep, powerful energy. This was her final chance to save her mother. The elixir would grant her the means to heal her, but in return, it would demand an enormous sacrifice, something more precious than she could ever have imagined. But as the hum of the elixir grew louder, filling her senses, another voice echoed in her mind, the guardian's voice, now faint but distinct. "The elixir's power is given, not taken. It will heal your mother, but in doing so, it asks for something more valuable than what you are willing to offer. But you have made your choice. The true power was never in the elixir, but in your journey and your heart." Anera blinked. She had heard the words before, but now their meaning resonated deeply within her. The true power, she realized, had not been in the elixir itself, but in her will to change the fate she had been told to accept. The tests, the trials, these had been about far more than mere survival. They had been about understanding that sometimes the way forward could not be determined by the strength one held, but by the strength one shared. The guardian's voice faded, leaving only the warm glow of the elixir behind. Anera stood up, the bowl still in her hands. With a nod to Cain, she closed her eyes and whispered a prayer for her mother. This was the moment. As her fingers touched the surface of the elixir, the chamber seemed to pulse with energy, and for a brief moment, Anera felt as though the entire vault was alive, holding its breath. And then, the elixir began to work. It wasn't a sudden explosion of power, nor was it an overwhelming surge of magic. It was a quiet, gentle flow, like a breath that passed through her very being, filling her with warmth and clarity. She could feel the weight of it lifting off her shoulders as the energy flooded her heart, and for the briefest of moments, she understood everything. Her choices, her journey, the loss, and the hope. All of it had led her to this singular moment. And now, she could save her mother without fear of sacrificing everything else. She knew, at that instant, that true strength came from love, from connections, and from the courage to trust in one's heart. The elixir was only the vehicle for that. In the end, the journey would not just save her mother, it would change her life forever. For every battle she fought, she was learning more about herself. And that was the ultimate victory. Cain stepped forward as the glow of the elixir faded into the air. "What now?" he asked. Anera took a final look at the room, the vault. It had given her everything it could. And now it was time to leave. "It's over," she said, her voice filled with a deep inner peace. "Now we return." Together, they turned toward the exit of the vault. The once ominous room felt lighter, and as they left, Anera knew the real journey had only just begun. The elixir was in her mother's hands now, But Anara herself had found the one thing the galaxy could never take away, a purpose that transcended power and immortality, something far more enduring. And as she and Cain stepped into the light beyond, she felt an unspoken promise in the air that this was only the first chapter of her story. The adventure was far from over.